Hi, lovelies. Welcome to Val Fashion's YouTube channel. My name is Eunice. In this video, we'll be learning how to make this beautiful, stylish, sleeveless gathered dress. So, if this is your first time on my channel, please ensure to click on the subscribe button to subscribe and also make sure you put on your notification bell so you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. Thank you, and let's get started. So I'll be making use of this African print for this project, and I have two yards here. And then I also have this tool net we'll be using to create the gathers at the down part. And I have 12 yards of tool net. First, I'm going ahead to draw the shoulder line on the pattern paper. So from the shoulder line, I'm going to mark the bust point line, which is 8.5. Then the waistline, which is 13.5. The hip line is 21 inches. And then from this 21 inches, I will come down by 5 inches extra. This is where the Ankara print length will stop. So I'm going ahead to straighten out my line. So this is the bust line, the waistline, the hip line, and the length, that's the upper length, which is the Ankara length, okay? So next I'll go to the shoulder line after labeling the lines. So next I'll go to the shoulder line and mark half of the shoulder measurement. The shoulder measurement is 14 inches, half of it is 7. I'm marking exactly on 7 inches. On this 7 inches mark, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. And then I'll mark the neck width of 3 inches. I'll connect this 1 inch to this 3 inches mark here. And right now we have the shoulder slant. So next, to enter the armhole measurement, you divide the bust by 6 plus 1.5. That will give you the armhole. So and that gave me 6.5. So the armhole I'm working with here is 6.5. So to connect the line to the shoulder line, I'm reconfirming the shoulder measurement of 7 inches so that I can have a straight line. So here is the armhole line, which is also called the chest line. Okay, so this armhole line, I'll get the midpoint of the armhole line here by folding my tape into two. So at this midpoint, I will go in by half of an inch. This is to eliminate any bulge at the midpoint of the armhole. I'll connect it back to the shoulder tip. So to curve it to meet the chest line or the armhole line down, I'll enter quarter of the bust measurement on that line, and then I'll curve it this way. Can you see where the armhole stops? And that's it. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to enter the nipple to nipple measurement. The nipple to nipple is 6.5 and half of the nipple to nipple is 3 and quarter. So you can see I've marked 3 and quarter inch on all the lines. So I'll go ahead and use my straight ruler to connect the points. So this line I'm marking is the nipple to nipple line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to enter our darts. I'll be taking a dart of half inch on both sides of the nipple to nipple line on the waistline. So I'm marking half inch on both sides. So from the bust point line, I'll come down by 1 inch like this, and then I'll connect the dart to meet this 1 inch mark I have there. And then here on the hip line, I'll go up by 2 inches from the hip line, and I'll also connect the dart to zero rise at this point. So you can see that this is just our regular darts for our normal full scale basic bodice block, okay? So I haven't done that. The next thing I'm going to do is to enter all our horizontal measurements. So on the bust line, I'm going to enter quarter of the bust measurement, which is 7.5 inches. So I'll mark 7.5 inches at this point. On the waistline, quarter of the waist measurement is 6.5. So this 1 inch that I have here, I'm going to replace it on the waistline. On the hip line, quarter of the hip measurement, which is 9 inches, and I'm marking on 9 inches. So for this length now, at the length, whatever I have on the hip line, I'm going to increase the length I'm going to increase the measurement by 1.5 inches on the full length. So that gave me 10.5. So I'm going ahead to connect the points like this. So I'm connecting from waist to hip, and then from waist to the chest line, okay, to bust line and then the chest line. So you can see that this regular basic bodice block. So next I'm marking the neck depth, and I already have neck width of 3 inches. So this neckline I'm drawing is for the front neckline. And then for the back neckline, I'm using a neck depth of 1 inch and the neck width of same 3 inches. So I'm also going ahead to curve out the neckline just like this. So now we have the front neckline and the back neckline, okay? So now you can see we have our basic bodice block, full scale basic bodice block. So I'll be separating this pattern. I'll be cutting through this pattern on the waistline. That's to separate the upper bodice from the down part. So before we do that, I'll go ahead and cut out this pattern. I'll be cutting on the back neckline since the back is higher. Then when we're done, we'll alter the front. So you can see I've cut out my pattern. And then on this waistline, I will separate the up from the down. So now we have our skirt pattern and we have the half scale pattern at the upper part. So now to create the scallop shape that we saw, that's the scallop shape of the Ankara, okay? I'm going to come in by half of an inch from the center front, and then I'll create this curve to meet the nipple to nipple line, which is the dot line here. Can you see? So I'm going to curve it to meet this point. So all you just need is your armhole curve, or you can still use your free hand to do this. So you can see I've created the curve. So I'm going to measure what I have left there, and I have about 2 and 3/4, not up to, yes, about 2 and 3/4. So I'll measure what I have there. I have about 2 and 3/4. I'm going to mark the same 2 and 3/4 on the other side of the line. So I'm marking that 2 and 3/4 on the other side of the line, and then I'll curve it this way to meet this point. So can you see that? So now I have the curve I want to have, half inch on this side. And take note that the center front will be on fold. So by the time I'm cutting on the fabric, when you open it, I'm going to have 1 inch. So from this side here now, I'm going to mark 1 inch, not half inch anymore like I marked from the center front. So I've marked my 1 inch, and then I'll confirm one side of the curve, and it is 2 and 3/4. Can you see? So I haven't confirmed my 2 and 3/4, and then I'll measure what I have on the line here and mark where it ends at the upper part, and then I'll curve it this way. Take note that this curve is topping on the hip line. So that is why I came down by 5 inches from the hip line. This is how long I want the curve to be. So it's connecting to the exact hip line of the client I'm making this outfit for. So I'm going ahead to cut out the curves just like you can see me doing. So here is what our pattern looks like. I'm going to cut out the fabric right away and show us. So here I've cut out the front piece. I've cut both lining and fabric, and I've also cut the back piece. So you can see that for the front I added my sewing allowance of 2 inches by the side, and then I added half inch at the waistline. This is for joining the waist to the down part, okay? And then for the back, you can see that I added my zip allowance of 1.5 inches at the center back. So you want to add all the necessary allowance. So I'm going to separate the front from the back, and then I'll go ahead and cut the front neckline on my pattern paper so that I can cut out the front neckline on the main fabric. So I'll place it this way and trace out this exact neckline I have here on the pattern paper. So this way now we now have our front neckline as 3 by 3 inches, okay? So now the next thing I'm going to do is to notch the dart points so that you know where the dart is, so that you don't sew at the wrong part. So I've notched the dart point. Okay, and then for the back, I'm going to also do the same thing by notching the dart point as well, and then I'm going to also take out zipper bulge. So this is me just confirming my sewing allowance. You can see I have 2 inches at the side, and then I'm going ahead to notch the dart points as well. So you just want to make sure that this reflects on both the lining and fabric. So here from the center back, to eliminate zipper bulge, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch from this zip allowance area. I'll mark 1/2 inch here, and then I'm going to slant the line to meet the neckline all the way to the neckline, just like this. Okay, so I'll cut out this part. If you don't take out this zipper bulge, the zipper will bulge at the back. You're going to have some folds at the back, so you don't want to have this problem at all. So you can see that I did it on both the lining and the fabric. And then this is the skirt pattern. So you can see also that I added my 1/2 inch at the upper part, which is the waistline. I'm also going ahead to notch the darts on the waistline too. You can see I added my 2 inches by the side, and also I have my 1/2 inch on the waistline for joining the up and down. So just like I eliminated zipper bulge on the back of the upper bodice, I will repeat the same thing on the skirt of the down part. Okay, so you want to make sure that you confirm your side seam allowance so that everything is well placed. You can see that I'm pinning it so that it doesn't keep shifting. So, and here I have my 2 inches at the side, and then at the center back I have my 1.5 inches, which is for zip allowance. So I'm going to also mark 1/2 inch like I did for the upper part, and then I'm going to slant it to stop above the hip line. Can you see? It's above the hip line. So I'll go ahead and cut out this. So by doing this, our zipper will sit nice and flat at the back. So right now I've taken out my zipper bulge. So that's that, and we're okay. So you will notice that the scallop part, I didn't add any allowance of 1/2 inch. This is because what I already marked there, that's from the center front, I came in by 1/2 inch, and when we sew, that's 1/2 inch, and when we cut our fabric, we'll have 1 inch open when it is open. So I didn't add any seam allowance there, so that by the time I sew with that 1/2 inch, it reduces it to give me that sharpness I want on the scallop part. So that is why I didn't add any 1/2 inch allowance on the scallop part. That's on this curved part. That's what I'm talking about. I didn't add any seam allowance there. What I have there is just okay. So I'm going to stitch with my 1/2 inch round there. So it gives me that sharp shape that I'm looking for. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do now is to start stitching our pieces together. So I'll be stitching the upper parts first, and I'll be stitching the fabric to fabric, that's Ankara to Ankara and lining to lining. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stitch the shoulders of the front piece together, and then I'll also stitch the linings on the shoulders together, and which is what I've done already. You can see I ironed the seam lines open. So I did the same thing for the fabric and for the lining rather, and I ironed the seam lines open. So right now I'm placing the right side of the fabric facing the right side of the lining, making sure to align the shoulders. Where I have the stitch on the shoulders, you can see I pinned that point, and I'm making sure they are aligned. I'm doing the same thing on the other side. You want to make sure to pin this point where you have the stitch on the shoulder so that they are aligned. I'm pinning this point, and then I'll pin it all the way to the zip allowance. So having pinned them together, this is what we have. So I'm going to start stitching now. This is from the center back. I'll take it around the neckline and bring it down this way. So I'm going to show us again. I'll stitch from the center back this way, take it around the neckline and bring it down this way to the other part of the center back. And then for the sides, I'm going to stitch right like this. I'll start from the waistline, stitch it around the armhole down to the waistline. From the waistline around the armhole down to the waistline. I'll repeat the same thing on this side as well. And then I'll come back and show us what we have. Remember that we are making a sleeveless gown. So this is just a very neat way of making a sleeveless gown without having to turn the neckline. Just very simple way of making a sleeveless gown. So as you can see, I'm done stitching around the neckline and the sides and also the armhole. So I'm going ahead to notch the seam allowance. So at this center back, you can just cut out this part so that this place can sit nice and flat when you iron it. So I'm also cutting and notching the armhole area. Can you see? So I'll do the same thing on the other side, and then I'll turn it out to the right side and give it a very nice press and show us what we have. So after pressing the neckline and the armhole, I went ahead to place hemming gum in between the lining and the fabric. This is to give it that neat finishing and to seal up that part so that everything sits nice and flat. And then I've also gone ahead to sew my darts on the waist. That's the waist dart. I stitched the waistline where I brought out the fabric from, and then I went ahead to stitch my darts on both the front and the back piece. I also repeated the same thing on the skirt pattern. I've sewn my darts already. You can see everything is coming out so neat and beautiful. So for this curved shape I have, that's the scallop shape, I stitch the lining and fabric together so that I have one piece. So this is it, and I repeated the same thing on the back piece. I've stitched them together. Okay, so right now I'm going to place the upper bodice with the down part. You want to make sure that the darts are aligning. So these are the two front pieces, the skirt and the upper part. And making sure that the darts are aligned. You want to make sure of this. This is very important. Don't let your darts shift one to the right and one to the left. They have to be on the same line. So I'm pinning them at this point, and then I'll take this to my sewing machine and stitch on 1/2 inch, which is the seam allowance I added. And then I'm going to have something like this when I'm done. So I'm also going to repeat the same thing for the back pieces. I'm going to place right side of the fabric facing right side of the that's of the upper part, and then I'll make sure to align my dart just like I talked about it for the front. You make sure that it's aligned. I'm pinning this point, and then I'm going to stitch on 1/2 inch, which is my seam allowance. I'll repeat the same thing on the other side, and then I'm going to sew my zipper. I'll weave the waistline and then sew the zipper on the center back, and then go ahead and shape this gown on the side. On the allowance I added, I'll be shaping on 1 inch, so the remaining 1 inch is going to be for ease. So it's actually remaining 1/2 inch because I've used 1/2 inch to turn my lining inside, so the remaining 1/2 inch is going to be for ease. So I'm going to shape it, and then I'll come and show us how to go about the net part. So I'll be right back. So as you can see, I'm done stitching the zipper. I made sure that my zipper, the waistline is well aligned. That's at the half length where I have the half cut. Okay, you want to make sure that everything is well aligned, and then I ironed my zipper. This will actually help to give it that hitch free opening. And then I've shaped the sides on the seam allowance of 1 inch. So now to create the net, I'm going to measure the what I have here on this curved area, that's on the scalloped area. So just watch carefully the way I'm placing my tape around the shape. I'm taking the entire measurement, and this is it. So, and I have 39.5. So this is 39.5. So remember that whatever I have in front is what I have at the back. So I'm going to multiply this 39.5 times 2. So that will be for both front and back, and that will give me 79 inches. So now I have 79 inches round all these curves that I have here, okay? So my net now, the length of the net is 60 inches in length. So first I'm going to fold that lengthwise. I'll fold it lengthwise, and I will, when I fold 60 inches into two, that will give me 30 inches. So basically now it means I'm duplicating the net. That's, I'm making it double. It's going to be two layers right now when I fold into two. So after folding into two, you can see I've gone ahead to pin it so that it doesn't shift. Then next I'm going to fold widthwise. That's, I'm going to fold now into four. So remember that when I folded into two, I have two layers. And then when I fold widthwise, I have 12 yards of net. If I fold it into two in width, I will now have 6 yards. I hope we understand. So that will now give me four layers. The thicker that's the more layers I have, the thicker the net, or the, how am I going to say it now, the fuller the fabric will be. You get? So that's what I'm trying to say, the fuller it will be. So you just want to, I'm duplicating it so that I have so much thickness, so it's not too transparent, so that I don't have too much to gather, and then I will still have that nice fullness. So basically, now that I have folded into four, I have 6 yards of fabric to gather at this hemline. That's at this curved shape that I have here. Okay. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and create the gathers. So you can see I've run my gather stitch at the upper part, and then I have gathered it to what I measured. But this is what I did. Instead of gathering it to 79 inches exactly, I added 5 inches to it. You will understand why I increased it by 5 inches. This is because I want it to overlap. You don't want it to meet exactly at this point. So now it's time for us to stitch the net to the hem, that's to this curved shape. So I'm going to be placing it from here, just pinning from here, and then let's get to the sewing machine. I will show us how to stitch this together. So to stitch it from the center back, I placed my net on the right side of the fabric, and then I'm stitching from the center back following the curved shape I have. I'm going to keep stitching on this curved shape round, round, and round till I get back to this same point at the center back. So take note that you can actually pleat this if you want to pleat it. I prefer doing gathers. Gathers gives me more fullness than pleats, but this depends on preference anyway. For me, I prefer to gather it, and it is easier to work with gathers because that way you are able to arrange it to give it that evenness. So every part of the curve is going to look even. So, but if you are okay with pleating it, please go ahead and pleat it. So it can either be pleated or gathered. Okay, so I'm just going to keep sewing round and round and round and round, just following the curve gradually. And then when I get to the center back, I'm going to show us how to overlap that extra 5 inches that I have. Okay. So while I was sewing, I don't really know. I can't tell what happened to my camera, and it became a little blurred. I don't know if the lighting is too much. So please bear with me. I hope you people can see what I'm doing. So I've gotten to the center back. So you can see this part, this side that is folded. I started with the side that is open. That's the part you can see the tips of the net. So the other side that is folded is the part that will overlap on it. You want to also make sure that you do this so that the part that is overlapping on it, that will be outside, is neatly folded inside. You don't want to have any tackiness on the outside of your outfit. So here at the center back, can you see how I am now overlapping the net on the other side? Can you see what I'm doing? So you can see I'm going to stitch it over it like this. So you want to make sure that you stitch really close here, but this is just so that you don't have two edges showing. You just want to have one visible, okay? So I'm just doing it in a way that I will neatly cover the one underneath. Can you see what I have? So this is what it looks like. Can you see? So you can see everything is really coming out beautiful. So I'm going to take this to my weaving machine and weave all the edges. I'll weave it and then I'll cut the lining we'll be using to cover this net. You're not going to leave it like this, so you need to line the net area. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, my weaving machine, weave it and remove the gather thread and also give it a nice press, and then I'll show us how to sew the lining to the inside of this outfit to cover the net. Okay, that's to stop the net from revealing. Okay, so let's go and do that and come back. So after taking out the gather thread, I went ahead to iron this outfit, and this is what it looks like. Can you see how beautiful the scallop shape is? And I've also gone ahead to cut the lining I'll be using to cover up the net. So to place the lining, I'm going to measure from the waistline to where the zipper ends. And from the waistline to where the zipper ends, I have 7 inches. Can you see? It's about 7 inches. So now from the starting point of my lining, I'm going to place this lining on fold. You can see I folded it into two. And I'm going to measure 7.5 inches. This is because I need half inch to sew it to the waistline. So I got 7 inches from when I measured from the waistline to where the zipper ends, and then I added half inches, so that's 7.5. So from this 7.5 mark, I'm going to sew the lining all the way down to the hem. And you can also see that I've hemmed the down part of the lining. So I'm leaving the upper part open. That's where the zip is, okay? So I'm going to turn this lining now to the right side. And take note that I cut my lining in excess because I'm going to pleat this lining on the waistline. So this is optional. You can cut exactly without any excess. I'm pleating it because this is for a child I'm doing it. So this will actually help the gown to be fuller. Okay. So the entire width of the lining I'm using is 60 inches and her actual waist measurement is 26 inches. So I'm just going to pleat this 60 inches on this waistline, so you can see that it will actually add to the fullness and create pleats. Okay, so now this is the waistline. I'm picking the seam allowance of the waistline, so I'm going to turn this lining now, right side of the lining facing the lining from inside. See, just take note of the way I'm pinning it. So I'm turning it now. Now the lining has a right side. I'm placing the lining right side of the lining facing the lining side of the outfit. So I'm just going to create pleats randomly. You don't really need to measure this one. Just create your pleats randomly. Here at the side where I've stitched, I cannot pleat there. I can't stitch there because I've stitched the side. So I'm just going to skip that side. I'll be using needle and thread at that point later. So I'm just going to create pleats around the waistline all the way to the other side of the zipper. I'll do that and then I'll show us how we'll stitch this waistline. So after creating the pleats, I'm now going ahead to stitch the lining to the waistline. That's just to the seam allowance. You want to make sure that you're stitching it to the seam allowance alone. And then I'm going to skip the point where I have my side seam allowance on the dress and then get to the front and also stitch and also skip the side seam again. You cannot stitch on that side seam because I've already stitched it already. That's I've joined the sides of the gown together. So I'm going to skip that part. I earlier mentioned that that part I'm going to use my needle and thread to tack that area. So now I'm on the other side of the back. So I'll do the same thing. It will still not even get to the zip allowance area because I've also fixed my zipper. So it will not get to that part. I'm just going to stitch it and then show us the final outcome. So here we are. This is what we have. Can you see this side is open? And you can also see that this side is open. So this is what our waistline looks like. Can you see how beautiful and neat it is? So I made sure that the seam allowance is in between the lining and the main fabric. So it's keeping it really, really neat. So let's get to the table so that we can see what we have. Okay, so this is what the reverse side of our gown looks like. So if you take a close look at the hem of the net, you will notice that the hem of the net is not equal. This is because we stitched this net to a scalloped area, that's a curved area up and down, okay? So some sides are longer than some. So this is what I'm doing right now. I measured from the shoulder to the full length of my client, which is 41 inches. So, and I've marked that 41 inches and I'm going ahead to trim out the excess fabric I do not need. So now if you are making this, you make sure that your net is 6 to 7 inches longer than your actual length. This is so that by the time you are done stitching it to the curved area, that's to the scallop area, you can trim out the excess fabric you don't need. If you use your exact length, it is going to be shorter by the time you trim out. So you don't want to make the mistake of using your exact length. Just make sure that your length, the length of the net, is more than your actual length with about 6 to 7 inches, okay, depending on how deep or how high you went to create your scallop shape. So for me, remember, we went up by 5 inches to create the scallop shape, so that's why I said 6 to 7 inches longer than the actual length. So this is what I have after trimming out the excess fabric. So you can see, and this is our zip area. Can you see how the side, that's the center back of the zip, is open? And then this side that I didn't stitch, I'm going to use my needle and thread to tack it and give it a very, very nice press. We are actually done with this gown and I really love the outcome. I enjoyed making this gown and I hope you enjoyed watching and you learned something from this video. If you did, please make sure to like this video, share this video, and make sure to put on your notification bell. That's after you must have subscribed to my channel. Please, subscription is free. Just please subscribe to my channel. That's your way of supporting my video and saying well done. So thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video. Bye and stay safe.